communism fell, I was invited to come to Shakespeare University. Shakespeare University is one of the most secular, godless universities in the world. It was in the country of Hungary. Intelligent intellectuals. And they said to me, "Pastor, you come there." The president of the university invited me to come. He said, "You're going to give a lecture on astronomy." I don't know much about astronomy. I had one lecture on astronomy. I took a class on astronomy in college, but he said, "This is what we're going to do. You speak on astronomy for 1 hour. Then we're going to have an atheist speak on astronomy for an hour. And then the questions are going to come from the students." And I said, "Mr. President, that's a wonderful idea. I'm happy to accept the invitation. But you let your atheist astronomer speak first, since I'm your guest, and let me speak second." I mean, I may be a preacher, but I'm not that stupid. Because I knew that I may not know a lot, but I know how to ask a lot of good questions. And I want to ask questions about his lecture. I don't want him asking too many questions about mine. So I went to the university, got there, and the university professor said to me, he said, "Now, Mr. Finley, we got a problem here." I said, "What's the problem?" He said, "The other university professor is supposed to lecture first. He had to be called away. He's not here to lecture today." I said, "Praise the Lord." So I said, "No problem at all. Just let me speak for 2 hours." I spoke for 2 hours on the existence of God, the philosophical, psychological evidence for the Creator God. At the end of the lecture, we had questions and answered. Faculty was sitting over on this side, and the students were sitting here. I had talked about creation and the marvel of the stars and the Creator God and how that answers the great philosophical questions of life, because I knew they could debate me on. On science, but I knew they couldn't debate me on philosophy, because I knew that the philosophical underpinnings of atheism are bereft. They are absolutely barren. There is no philosophical underpinning of atheism that gives you any kind of moral ethic at all. And they know that, and we know that. And so, at the end of the lecture, a student raised his hand, and I could tell that he had been prompted by the faculty, because the faculty sat on the right, and he was sitting in the center. And so the student raises his hand, and the student says, "Mr. Finley." "Yeah?" "I got a question." "Yeah, go ahead." When the Soviet cosmonaut Yuri Gagarin circled the stratosphere in the Sputnik, he said he never saw God. Did you ever see God? I knew where he was going. And all of a sudden, sometimes the Lord gives you an answer. And it's not something you've thought about before. And the Lord puts that in your mind, and the Lord put an argument in my mind, and I said to him, I went a different direction. I said, "Now, I have a question to ask you." I said, "I want to leave God out of it, want to leave the Bible out of it, leave faith out of it. I just want to talk about some intellectual things." And I said, "Of all the knowledge in the world that there is, how much knowledge do you as students have? Let's say, for example, there are about 2,800 known languages in the world. How many do you speak? Do you speak 100 languages? Do you speak 200? How many languages do you speak? Of all the knowledge of chemistry that there is in the world, how much knowledge of chemistry do you have? Let's suppose there were 500 new books written on chemistry in the last 10 years. How many of those 500 have you read? Of all the knowledge of astrophysics in the world, let's talk about China. Let's talk about the Ming Dynasty. I want you to give me right now, take out a piece of paper, please, and write the 17 emperors of the Ming Dynasty. I want you to write who they married and their 38 sons or daughters or whatever it is. Just tell me all that. Tell me all that. Of all the knowledge in the world, of all the books printed this year, of the thousands and thousands and thousands of books, and of all the scientific knowledge, how much do you have? Would you say you know 50% of all that there is to know? From an intellectual standpoint. They said, "No, we don't know 50% of all there is to know." "Do you know 25% of all there is to know?" "No, I don't know 25% of all there is to know." "Do you know 10% of all the knowledge? Say this thing out here is some body of knowledge. How much do you know? 10% of it?" "No." I said, I looked at the teachers, because I knew where that question was coming from. It was coming from the teachers, not the students. So I said to the teachers, "Will you give me this one, that your students maybe know 5% of all there is to know?" And they said, no, they don't. I said, "Okay, because you teachers are so outstanding, you got so many PhDs in this faculty, you're so intelligent," you got to play it to them sometime. "You're so intelligent, you know 5% of all there is, your students know 5%. That means you don't know 95% of all there is to know. So I only have one question. If by your own admission you don't know 95% of all there is to know, could God exist in the 95% of the knowledge you don't have?" Amen. You're telling me that this is knowledge, and you're telling me you only know this 5% of that knowledge. You're telling me by your own admission you don't know 95% of all there is to know. could God exist in the 95% of the knowledge you don't have? And they said, Mark, from an intellectual standpoint, that's true. Now, let me ask you another question. If there's only two alternatives, one alternative, and I'm not asking you to believe, I'm just saying if there are only two alternatives, one is a loving God created you, He fashioned you, He shaped you, and that He's with you in your life, and He'll give you purpose and meaning, and beyond the grave you can live with Him for eternity, and there'll be no sickness, suffering, and death. I'm not asking you to believe that. I'm saying if that's an alternative, or this is the second alternative, there's really no meaning to life, you're an enlarged animal, you're a little higher than the apes, you have no direction or purpose in life, and when you die you go into the grave and Russian worms eat your body. Now, if that's the only two choices you have, which one are you going to take? I'm not asking you to believe. I'm just asking you if those are the two choices you have, which one are you going to take? They said, obviously, we'll take the first one. I said, then you're not an atheist, because an atheist says, I don't know God. I know God doesn't exist. You told me that you don't know if God exists or not, because He might exist in the 95% of the knowledge you don't have. You then told me, then you're not an agnostic either, because an agnostic says, God may not exist, but if He does, I don't even care. But you just told me you did care. You know what you are? You're a seeker whose minds have been programmed with atheistic knowledge because you haven't heard the other side of the question. And that's why I came today, because you're really seekers. See, you're seekers. That's what they are. They just didn't know they were seekers, and somebody had to tell them that they were seekers. See, the reason they functioned the way they did is because of what was programmed into their minds. But deep within their heart, they were seekers. And I said, look, I brought 25 Bibles. Any seekers who want a Bible have to come up and get one. I thought there was going to be a riot. Those kids get up out of their seats and mauled me literally for Bibles, almost fought over the Bibles. Why? Because the message of a creator God is the message that our heart longs for. We don't want to be any speck of cosmic dust in the universe. We want to know God created us. So that's the message